background checks before listing themselves as caregivers rarely get any business. But I think she's going to end up rethinking that because the platform takes on a certain level of liability by posting individuals on there who have not gone through any screening. So people who can't afford those caregivers who have listed themselves at a higher price because they paid to certify themselves may opt to get someone who refuses to get a background check because they shouldn't be around kids. When she cleans those things up, I think this platform is going to be very hot because child care is a big deal and it's being exacerbated by the gig economy. More and more people are taking odd shifts in order to avoid the child care crisis, but eventually they have to have multiple gig jobs in order to pay the rent. So they need somewhere that they can get quality child care. And this platform could be the gig and sharing economy way to plug in those gaps. I'm going to reach out to Miss Larson and see if I can conduct a Guerrillapreneur mastermind interview with her and put those tough questions to her. Because I'd like to see this platform thrive and spread across the country. And this is why I also recommend having a board of advisors. If you're going to call yourself the Uber or Airbnb of your industry sector, have somebody on your board that actually knows something about Uber and Airbnb. In this case, Uber and Airbnb launched services that did no screening on the people who provided their gig-related task to consumers, and they got sued. Don't recreate the wheel. Build on what these guys have already established as precedent and make your platform better. What's fourth in Guerrillapreneur news? Airbnb is going to work because being at home sucks. Airbnb got its start as a home sharing service, but that market is under siege. Hotels are doing a great job at fending off Airbnb in the leisure segment all over the world. So as a result, Airbnb has shifted gears and started to focus on the more lucrative business travel by focusing on homes that offer 24/7 access and all sorts of business amenities. According to an article published by Allison Chewing in commercialrealestate.com, Airbnb has launched an effort in Australia to refine and perfect their business offering. Corporate trips are the top growth market in Australia's travel sector, jumping by almost 11% to 21 million travelers over the last 12 months, according to tourism research data out of Australia. Ms. Chewing quotes the Airbnb country manager for Australia and New Zealand, Sam McDonnell, stating that globally, Airbnb's work-related bookings more than tripled in the last 12 months. That's on the back of tripling in the last 12 months before that. So there's rapid growth in the business sector, and that gives Airbnb the perfect pivot to move away from the leisure market where they are under global assault. In New York, in March of 2018, Mayor Bill de Blasio signed new laws requiring Airbnb to hand over detailed data on its users. They're also setting heavy fines if the company does not turn this data over. Now, this is going to set the stage for new licensing and new fees that would make home sharing less viable than purchasing a hotel room. According to an August 22, 2018 article in Voices of San Diego has all but banned short-term rentals. Their city council decided in August to reject the interest of their local residents who want to keep the short-term listings to all-out ban Airbnb, VRBO, and HomeAway. Now, this is a complete about-face for San Diego because they had marketed themselves as a smart city open to the sharing economy. To add insult to injury, Trader Joe's even sued Airbnb because residents of San Diego were organizing in their parking lots trying to get this ordinance overturned. Trader Joe's suit was ultimately dismissed, but Airbnb is having a bad couple of months. Orlando decided to regulate home sharing. In an August 15, 2018 article from News965.com, explained that the Orlando City Council had passed an ordinance requiring homeowners to register their homes with the City of Orlando and to also purchase a license and meet additional requirements. Homeowners are also required to reside in the home or must be present during booking. Homeowners must pay a year one registration fee of $275. It'll be $100 every year after that if you live in the property, and $125 if you have a non-owner occupied property. Let me get on my soapbox for a minute and get you all fired up. All over the country, you have city councils telling Americans who have purchased assets how they can use them and whether or not they can make money off those assets. You're finding out how few rights you really have when you try to use the assets that you have purchased to go up against the corporate giants who have bought and paid for many of these city councils in order to protect the power that they built. Unfortunately, many of these city councils that are passing these ordinances are led by Democrats, and they are going to find themselves in the crosshairs of millennials who have grown up with the sharing economy, who are workers in the gig economy, and who do not plan to have the world go back to inefficient markets where you waited for 30 minutes for a taxi to find you on the corner. The other question I have for you is, how free are we really? When city councils can limit your ability to make money with assets that you've purchased legally, how different are we from the managed economies of China? When I've talked to you about the Chinese sharing economy, it's wide open. Fewer regulations, and so they have explosive growth. We're finding that the status quo companies are finding ways to use regulation instead of competition and letting market forces do its thing. Taxi cab companies could have easily deployed apps making it more efficient and easier for consumers to find and hail those taxis. They could have invested in their cars and made it a more comfortable ride. Instead, they wanted to maintain a monopoly, feed you crap and call it caviar, where Uber and Lyft came along and gave you a real alternative, and now these old economy companies are buying their way back in by buying the politician. And this isn't just happening domestically. This sort of battle for the leisure market is happening all over the globe. Taiwan even threatened to legalize Airbnb. I know that sounds good, but legalizing means they're going to put more regulations and fees. The Taiwanese ordinance requires homeowners to register their homes with local governments and to gain approval before they start offering up those rooms for short-term rentals. The approval time can last as long as 180 days. That's a major deterrent. Japan also passed a very similar ordinance. So the empire is striking back all around the globe as it relates to leisure travel. Now, according to the Yahoo article, 1.3 million foreign travelers used Airbnb while in Taiwan. That represents 12% of the total number of inbound tourists. And Airbnb's woes don't end there. China's homestay is booming. Homestay is China's equivalent of Airbnb, except for they offer some really unique services like catering to children and allowing pets. These guys have just started to grow like a weed. According to an August 2018 article in Shine.cn, Homestay's booking service Tujai has 1.2 million rooms globally and 800,000 in China. Tujai's service is available on Ctrip, Elong, Kunair, Tencent, and Alibaba's service platforms, making it one of the top shared accommodation providers in China. Kei-Fu Lee, the author of AI Superpowers, is right. We are now battling it out in two separate hemispheres, two different dimensions, the US-driven sharing economy and the Chinese-driven sharing economy. And their models are different. Different enough that startups cannot thrive in both dimensions. As Kei-Fu Lee stated, you gotta pick one. The Chinese model reminds me a lot of the 1970s and 1980s Japanese keiretsu model, where these systems are fully integrated with powerful players using platforms and loss leaders to drive transactions through their mammoth engines in order to get massive amounts of customer data. The US model is just not like that. You don't see the Ubers of the world also tightly linked to financial interests where they can get pulled through from renting a scooter all the way up to a banking account that then allows you to pay your utilities. You do see that in the Chinese model. Who's going to win? I think it's going to come down to a battle of tech, a battle of who's going to have the most dominant AI, who's going to have the best machine learning and automation and robotics. And this sets the stage for what's fifth in Guerrillapreneur news, because Uber is also under attack. March was a busy month for New York City Council and Mayor Bill de Blasio, because they also passed legislation that put a cap on the number of new Ubers and Lyfts licenses that can operate in the city. To operate a taxi in New York City, you had to buy a license or a medallion. And in 2013, the cost of those medallions were going for about $1.3 million. That's $1.8 million in today's dollars. Now, since Uber and Lyft have entered the market, the cost of a medallion has dropped to just $120,000. Many independent taxi drivers who own these medallions were hoping that those medallions would be their retirement. They'd be able to sell that license to someone else at an even higher price and retire with the proceeds. Well, they are completely underwater, and they have put pressure on the city council and Mayor de Blasio to stop the sliding trend. According to Mayor de Blasio, this new measure is actually going to help New Yorkers, because he claims that the influx of Uber and Lyft cars are contributing to the traffic and congestion. According to de Blasio, an estimated 40% of Uber cars on the road in New York at any given time are vacant, and they're usually vacant when there's heavy traffic. But here's the flip side of that argument. Having those Uber and Lyft cars on the street also helped provide transportation to parts of New York that were underserved. Many of the boroughs that did not get the kind of taxi support got support when Lyft and Uber came into the market. And if you continue to listen to this podcast, you're going to hear an interview that I'm doing with Dr. Raman Mohammed of Purdue University's Kennard School of Management, who did a study that showed that services like Uber and Airbnb are contributing to reductions in unemployment because they're bringing tourism dollars to parts of New York that had not seen it in the past. So how is Uber going to handle this regulatory assault? Like Airbnb, they're going to pivot. At the TechCrunch Disrupt conference, Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, please forgive me if I mispronounced your last name, went on to tell the audience that Uber is going to be pivoting away from ride sharing to more electric scooters and bikes, despite the fact that this could hurt profits. Now, this makes sense to some degree, because of the liability that goes along with Uber and all of the problems that Uber has faced when dealing with drivers and its own internal culture. When you move to these individual point-to-point solutions, you alleviate all those types of problems. But as a futurist, I've predicted in past episodes that Uber and Lyft will move even further downstream and become a part of the city infrastructure and manage all transportation for these cities, towns, and municipalities. I'll tell you why it does make sense. Because as we move away from car ownership in a tax system that incents capital, they're going to lose a lot of revenue. And how are you going to replace that? Rider fees and management fees. And that's where Uber and Lyft are going to come in with their platforms that are basically already doing that now, moving across multiple modes of transportation. They're going to replace the current bureaucratic infrastructure and manage that on behalf of many cities and towns. I've talked to you about the importance of the bike and scooter market in China and giving you many details about some of their bigger players like Mobike, who've been recently bought out. But there's other emerging markets where scooters and bikes are taking off. India, for one. Let's run down some of their bigger players. The oldest of the bunch is a company called Baxi, like bike plus taxi. They're a Gurugram-based bike taxi service platform that was founded in 2014 by Ashutosh Jahari and Manu Rana, and they've recently raised $1.4 million in seed funding. The next company is Bounce. They're based in Bengaluru and was founded in 2015 by Vivekananda Har, Baran Angi, and Anil G. Bounce is a dockless bike sharing company, and these guys raised $12.2 million in seed funding in July of 2018. The next company is Rapido. They were founded in 2015 by Aravind Sanka, Pavan G, and Rishikesh, sir. Rapido has 4,000 bikes in Bengaluru and over 1,000 in Gurugram. They have over 50,000 app downloads. These guys